Hi, this is Sheila with Conscious Conversation Central. It is December 1st, 2017, and I have as my guest this evening, BZ Rigger. And BZ, thank you so much for coming back and talking with me again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Fun to play.
I love it. I love it. And you know, when I asked you to come back and talk with me, I really, for the most part, unless I'm contacting someone with something specific that I want to talk about, I really don't have anything specific lined up. And I didn't at this time. But just about 5 minutes before we got together, a friend of mine over in Australia sent me a link to something, and I clicked on it and I heard some words, and it was as though something was activated within me, and I started shaking, and I was trying to describe it to you before we began, and I love the fact that you kind of actually helped me figure out, okay, this is what we need to talk about. And so that obviously happened for this very reason.
Yeah. It's a way for you to experience it just because, and then again, a way to play with it for others in the conversation. Was it different than, one thing I didn't ask you before, was it different than the quantum-y thing?
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
Very much so. The quantum-y thing is more like almost a dizzying feeling, swirly kind of dizzying.
Kind of phasing in and out thing. Yeah.
Right. This was, and as I was trying to describe it to you earlier, I wasn't doing a very good job, I don't think. I had only experienced something like this once or twice before, and the best word I could find for it was anger, but I wasn't angry. So I wasn't sure it was, and I still feel a little shaky in my body. So I did say adrenaline rush because it kind of felt, and it still kind of feels like that. It's an energetic thing, but it's also a sort of a vibratory thing, but on the inside. It's an internal kind of thing like this that can be unsettling, and that might be why I used the term anger. Because it wasn't a violent thing that I was experiencing. Now I'm feeling a little dizzy. So I guess I'm going to experience it all now. Guess I'm going to experience. But as I was sharing with you earlier, as everyone that does watch any of my videos, like in succession or anything, will know, today is the fourth, this video marks the fourth video for today. So I think I've been in an expansive mode all day. Yeah. Well, actually, as I shared with you before, really since Wednesday of this week. And, but really heavily into it all day today.
It's a kind of, on that, it's a kind of a dancing meditation. Because you're dancing in the energies with the other person, you're having a conversation, so there's a lot of heart center energy coming up. There's a connection actually where there's cohesion between the heart center and the mind, thinking thoughts, although you're not thinking, right? Because there's the two of you and the nature of the conversations that you're having. So it's like a dancing meditation is the way I call it. Have you think about times where you've had really good conversations and there's expansion going on, and especially when there's people where there's zero judgment, there's just whatever comes up. I can think of two women that I have conversations with like that a lot, and there's lots of expansion. There could be a topic that we start with, but it doesn't really matter.
Right.
It's there, and the feeling afterwards, it's very energizing, very relaxing. Like the amount of time that you just spent seemed much longer. If you were to look at your watch and say, oh, that was only an hour or whatever it was, it seemed like it was much longer, and it went by at the same time very quickly.
Right.
So there was no time feeling. Very I'm trying to think of the right word. Relaxing and energizing at the same time, if that makes sense. I mean, I know the feeling, so I know it makes sense. I'm not sure giving the right words to it.
No, I think, well, for me, you are. For me, you're giving the right words. And my, I don't know if my Reiki has activated all on its own or what, but I have an intense buzzing coming through my hands at the moment as well.
Me too.
Oh, do you? Okay. So, okay, everybody. You know, I've had a lot of comments on videos specifically with you and I, and others as well, but specifically with you and I, that talk about being able to actually feel the energy, and we discussed that before as well. You know,
well, they better hang on, because I can get a sense right now that we're really amping up here.
Yes,
but to go back to, it might be part of what I'm thinking about. I was just going to tie in where we started, not only right here on camera, but beforehand, before we started the video. I came up with the word as describing a time back in 1999, 98, 99, when I first felt that feeling. And it's like riding the tiger, and it's fierce. Fierce, not in any kind of negative connotation at all, but fierce is just the word, so it's hard to describe. I mean, maybe if you looked up fierce in the dictionary, you might go, no, I don't think so, but it's very passionate. It's very compelling. It's a very all-in feeling. You know, you're all in. Whatever the heck this is right now, I'm all in right now. And
I love what you did actually before we came on camera. You said you're holding on to the steering wheel going.
Right.
That's kind of what this feels like.
And that's great. Thanks for bringing that, because what I was saying is, instead of just holding on to the steering wheel when you get this fierce ride, that's part of a lot of things that are coming online, a lot of things that we're doing right now. Some of them we're learning how to do, and some of them we're remembering. So this feeling that we're having, we've had before, we've played with before, we've done that before, but we're remembering part of that. But the major part of the component is that we're learning it because we've never done it in an embodiment before. And that's what, embodiment ascension is all about, because it's never been done before. So we're walking, into heaven on earth, and it's happening all over Source's universe, where it's in this, the full, all of us, our whole soul, and all of our higher selves, the different aspects, are all coming in right to these bodies. So we have to learn how to go from, whoa, this is quite a ride, to, maybe one-handed steering and a loose hand as you palm turn, right? If you do a back up the car and you're just doing with your palm, so you've got control. You can grab if you need to, but you're not, so that it's much more natural. All of these things are all innate to us, so we need to trust that part, and I think really embrace, I want to say joyfully embrace the idea of, I have no idea what this is. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm going to go for the fun side of this experience rather than the white knuckling side. And okay, I'm going to bring it on. Let's do this.
Yes, I'm ready. I have to say, I'm finally to the point, I think, where I'm just going to trust that I got this.
You got
that the greater part of me, the higher part of me. I love the way in a lot of your conversations with Randy, you call so Big Sheila.
That's right.
Big Sheila has got this, right. And I'm just going to allow that to happen. and I'm going to go with the flow. And for me, I have always been a bit of a control freak. And, learned a bit about myself over the last 6 months, well, a little bit longer than that. Also codependent, which is where some of that control freak kind of thing came from. But I'm letting go of the reins, and I'm going to allow Big Sheila to handle it.
Yeah. Well, and play with Big Sheila coming into Sheila, and the two of you are handling it, because that co-creation between the two of you is that new being that you're creating. So when Big Sheila's coming in and Sheila, who's already an embodiment here, is coming up, this amazing, and when I play with the energy right now, the colors and the energy that I can see right between my hands is really pretty well. But that new being that we're creating when this comes down it's more than a cohesion. It's more than an integration of Big Sheila and Sheila. It's a whole new being. It's the Trinity coming together. There's lots of different phraseology depending on languaging, where you're from, a Bible or any of those kinds of things.
Right. Do you think that it would be fair to call it a symbiotic type of thing? As that's something that
not really, because it goes beyond that. Symbiotic is where this is an entity that's separate, and this is and they help each other. They use their environments to, in this, it's like in a symbiotic relationship, one, say an animal might dig up something, and how they dig it up to make their nest helps this other one, so they live together. Or the tree and the tree dying, and so that's symbiotic, but they're separate.
I see.
You're already together, right? But as you come fully into embodiment, so you really have this, what's created in your vessel, in your Merkaba, because your body is your Merkaba, your body is your light ship, basically.
Right.
That essence is a new being, not only on a physical level, but on an energetic frequency level, because the two have created this third. So you could look at it maybe as the divine feminine and masculines come together, and as it's come together in embodiment, it's now not this and that, or this or that. Some people say they're very right-brained or very left-brained. Some people say, it doesn't matter whether they're male or female. I notice that I embrace, my masculine side, and that masculine, I'm talking about energetic, much more than, so it's more than coming together. So isn't there a saying, the sum of the parts are greater than the whole, or something like that?
I see what you mean. Okay. So it's almost it's not just emerging, it's emerging
and birthing at the same time.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Emerging and a birthing. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're merging, and in the merging, you're creating something
brand new.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So it's like, divine, cosmic, orgasmic.
Right.
Sex, I don't know.
Oh, wow. And wait a minute. So, okay. See, I have all these puzzle pieces like falling into place at the moment. And so that would explain, for me anyway, a lot about what's been going on as far as like some of the physical things, because as that's taking place, there are codes and things like that that are activating different sequences, I would think, or that's what it feels like in my body. So there are things that are like being rearranged or changed, purged. There's a lot of that going on for me personally. And so I would imagine for everyone, or everyone that's choosing this, correct?
Yeah. I'm going to pop in with this for a minute because it came to mind as a metaphor. So if anybody's familiar with gardening and you look at a plant and it starts new growth, so that's softwood, right? And then further, depending on the variety of plant, we'll say a shrub or something. So early in the spring, it's new, very light colored green. It's soft and flexible. You could go up and kind of bend it. But the twiggy part of the shrub is down here, right? And then as you go through the season, it gets into a little firmer wood, and then it's a hardwood. Becomes into a hardwood. So what you can do and how it reacts to different things, and whether, depending on if it's a blooming shrub, So your body is actually changing. It's not only a change in vibrational frequency, but to use that metaphor, you're going from the softwood to the actual, if you cut a piece of a stem, that's a softwood stem, this brand new growth, it's soft. The cell structure, if you look under a microscope, the cell structure and its replicating abilities are different than if you take a cutting from the same plant 2 or 3 months later, where it's now moved out of the softwood stage to I forgot the technical term, but like a semi-softwood or semi-hardwood cutting, to then maybe 4 or 5 months after that, now it's a hardwood cutting.
Okay.
So, looking at it, it feels different. It doesn't have the same flexibility, malleability to it. So on the one hand, it doesn't have this flexibility, but on the other hand, it has more strength and more mass. But that we're doing the same thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I can feel that in my body. And sometimes it's not exactly comfortable.
No.
Yeah, sometimes it's not. And there seems to be, there has been a lot of, chatter, I should say, in different groups. And a lot of folks say, well, it's the time of year. Everyone's feeling, because the seasons are changing and everyone's feeling a little ill or whatever. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, that might hold true in, I don't know, the Northern Hemisphere or whatever. But when you speak to folks in completely different countries and in the Southern Hemisphere where, it's summertime. So, cold.
And they'll probably tell you they got summer colds, right?
And so it's not exactly, so for me, and Lisa and I were actually talking about this a little earlier in another recording. I feel like we both feel like there's an actual purging that has begun. For almost like a healing reaction or a healing crisis. And so what you're describing here about how our bodies are changing as well, that makes a lot of sense because we in one of our other conversations, we talked about doing that internal work, that we have to remove some things to make room for the greater being things. So there's, so everything will come on in, and fit, so to speak.
Right.
And so it makes sense to me that it's kind of the same thing, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. And I think I'm making not maybe an assumption, but a guess, I think, or I feel like, I should say, I'm just going to own it, that the better health we are in, the easier it might be. And I'm making that statement about myself because I haven't been in that great of shape in the last few months. And so, I mean, I have been in better shape before, but I wasn't taking very good care of myself. So
Right.
I think I'm having some extra detoxing symptoms.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. A couple things I would say that are coming to me when you bring that up is you don't have to be an amazingly fit being to go through this expansion and ascension and embodiment. What's most important is, it's always good to be healthy, eat healthy, but part of I've got like 3 different conversations coming in about saying something on this. Get them all to settle down for a minute. I think it's fair to say that one of the most important is how you hold your heart energy. So you could be incredibly fit, right? Run extra miles and, you don't drink, you don't smoke, all this kind of thing. So if a regular allopathic doctor would look at you and say, oh yeah, you're in great shape, right? But if you're not in your heart, if you're always in your head space, if you have a lot of negative programming, if that's your predominant vibrational frequency that you're carrying, that fitness will do nothing for you because it's all of that other stuff, right?
Right.
That is causing more of the what comes through, and you would label then as pain or serious discomfort or ow, with what's going on, is because you're holding all those other things. So the heart center is absolutely always the most important thing. So whether you're incredibly fit, kind of fit, not at all fit, healthy, whatever those things are, if you can shift that way, and in shifting that heart, because the heart is then your self-love, right?
Right.
You're doing all those things. So in and of itself, that's the best fitness routine, weight regime, healthy lifestyle change that you could start with, because it cascades to everything else.
Right.
And expands. So you've turned on the spigot of wellness, and now you can flood it through your body, which will flush the different toxins, and you can go through all that other stuff as well.
Okay, well that's a really good point to make then, because I have felt personally that, and I guess maybe that's just for me, because the clearer I got, the better health I got my body, my physical vessel in, the clearer my thinking processes have been, which has allowed me personally to be able to look at some of that programming, or that, that conditioning that doesn't serve me. So that might not be the case for everyone, I suppose, but for me personally.
But you just said something very important. So as you got healthier, and as you can't get healthier if you're not being in your heart space, if you're not loving yourself, if you're not giving yourself a break. You can't get there.
Oh, okay. I got you.
I don't care how many personal trainers you have. I don't care whether you're microbiotic or any of this. You can't get there. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, all right. Okay. Well,
so you couldn't do those things if you probably started by giving yourself a little bit of a break. Whatever you were, churning on, you relaxed a little bit of that, and you shifted more. You probably wouldn't have languages back then, but you shifted more into your heart. You shifted more into noticing, being kind, maybe in big ways or little tiny ways if you weren't used to it already. And that helped you to make those changes that were physiological and well-being changes, that you can kind of categorize and quantify.
Right.
But you got there because you started from within.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So now try this thought on too, which is one of the other ones that was wanting to come through, is that when we talk about your mental, your mentalities, the programming, the spinning, times we churn on things, those are all in your cellular memory. So like in your hand, they're if you have aches and pain, they're in your cellular memory. So as you let go of those consciously and release them, notice them come up, shift how you're, there's lots of different ways to do it, but they're coming out of your, being expressed out of your cellular memory. And sometimes in that act of being expressed, expelled, think of coming out, you're going to have, as that energy moves, you may have some pain or discomfort or,
or experience that healing reaction that I referred to earlier. Oh, that makes a lot of sense too then. Okay. Because I hadn't thought about it quite like that. I've read a lot about the idea of course, you can't be a Reiki master and not know that, if you have an energy blockage, that it could also be, that's an emotion that's causing you pain. It's, you might feel it physically,
right.
But it's actually, but I didn't think about it in that fashion before. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And that's why we're so, it's more, I was going to say it's twofold, but it's, probably a bazillion fold, as more light energy, and light is knowledge and information. And, since we're humans, we tend to, I can see a couple different lights around here. So it's not like a light bulb coming in. If they're light, has various spectrums and ranges and frequencies, and some is visible to these eyes and some is visible because we can sense them, although we couldn't point and say, oh, I see that source of that light over there, like ultraviolet. There's a whole bunch of, but there's a whole bunch of range that way beyond that, that only are usually talked about by scientists who, that's their thing, that light spectrums and that kind of thing. But nonetheless, they're all affecting us and they're all coming in.
Absolutely. I actually have said that many times, that the human visual range, if you think about the total visual range of light, and of course it's not this, but I'm going to say that, let's say the total visual range of light is this, we can only see about that much of it.
Right.
With our physical eyes.
And that's changing.
Yeah, it is changing.
That's changing with our physical eyes. It's changing with the third eye coming online, being open, able to, open the eyelid on that,
right.
And it's so you'll notice, one of the first things you'll notice is you'll be able to see many more colors.
And I do. As a matter of fact, that started for me early last year. But not, of course, not with my eyes open at first. It was during, what I laughingly call my meditation. And because you hear how everybody meditates, and I don't meditate.
I don't do it right either.
Yeah, I can't. I don't do well.
I gave up a long time ago. I tried for years.
Yeah, when I try to meditate, I fell asleep.
Right.
So, but I have an amethyst biomat, and I love to. That's when I get quiet, and but of course, in my mind, things just keep going on. I can't seem to quiet it down. But I noticed that I was starting to see all kinds of different colors that with my eyes open, I wasn't seeing. And and then it started happening. I could just be out in the yard and close my eyes, and then I'd be in just anywhere. It didn't matter. If I closed my eyes, I could see these different colors swirling around, and sometimes they were actually doing different things. It was very interesting. So
one of the things that I think is helpful. When it first started happening, it was very noticeable for me, and I do my own forms of meditation, but it's not sitting in a certain pose, and that doesn't work. I can do a meditation with my eyes open, doing something, and have part of me go off in it, and it's the same kind of things that other people recount in a meditation can happen. So I think that's really helpful for people, is that yes, there's different ways to do it, and you can do this, and then there's different ideas or tools or guides. Do it your own way, and that's the right way, for you. But I wanted to say the colors. So it was back in 2009 or 10, and the first shift of that was noticeable outside. I think, well, gosh, is that a new kind of, like a new seedling of a certain kind of tree? Because the leaves look the same, but there's different colors and there's more hues, and and then I'd look around and notice that was the same for whatever it was. It didn't have to be green, could be any color, bark, or just all the ranges. And it would be the kind of thing, if I took out, I do pastel paintings with soft pastels, and if I looked at that and tried to replicate it, with my paint, I would need a different set, or for the greens, I would need to go and buy the individual sticks, but I would have to get 30 or 40 to even come close to replicating the colors that I was seeing. So it was, and I laughed. I thought, well, I just got one of those mega sets of crayons, and then it kept happening where it would be up level. Sometimes if you look at the Crayola crayons and they come in the different size boxes, you got the little back, big, the double, 2, 4 stacks, so it would come and it would be however I was seeing before, and then the color, so I would get a bigger set and a bigger box with all the different colors. And now you have not just one red, you have a couple, and it keeps happening. It's really, it's not just the variety of colors, but the range in values in the color, the range in the hues of the color. Right. Some are much more translucent. They have different, so in other words, there'll be one color, let's say there might be a beautiful turquoise blue, and then another one that's almost the same shade and hue of turquoise, but it has a different, it's more translucent, so maybe more shimmery. Some might be a little bit more transparent, less opaque. Right. So that the other light around it, or as other colors around it. So, but they would be very distinct. So if it was a rainbow of just that one band in a rainbow, it'd be like this wide, and they'd all be. And have you noticed lately that the rainbows are getting, the bands and the rainbows are getting wider, and the same thing, you can now see the difference. So in, the strips, and you've got the indigo and all those different colors, but each one of them that you can notice, I would describe more as feel into it. Seeing too much thing makes us think rather than just trusting what we're actually bringing in the light. But you can notice the gradation of the same color. So there's, I think it's different hues, or right. It was fascinating. And I asked someone who happened to be near me when there was this great rainbow and very clear. And I said, do you see the rainbow? And he said, yeah. And now this is someone who's not outwardly at the stage to say that they're noticing things or know that they're not awake, kind of thing. Right. But they are on a lot of levels. They just haven't maybe trusted themselves or don't want to give voice to you. I'm not sure exactly what it is. But I said, is that rainbow seem different to you? Is there anything seem different to you about that rainbow? And he said, yeah, it's really pretty. I said, well, can you just, I said, because my eyes have been, different lately. I said, I'm just curious what you're seeing rather than, and it was very interesting because she looked at it and she said, well, the colors are fatter. The strips of color are fatter. I said, yeah. I said, does it seem anything else different about the colors or, and as she stopped and like noticed it, then she started and all of a sudden she's surprised. She said, wow, I didn't know it. I didn't realize that's, so it was interesting that she could see it. She just wasn't noticing. So it made me think of before when you were talking about it first, I saw it with my eyes closed. The thought that came to mind was, were you noticing with your eyes open that they were there? And or were you trusting that what you were noticing?
Well, as you were speaking about all of this with the colors and what you were experiencing with the changes, I was sitting here thinking to myself, I think I just didn't notice, or I took for granted some things because this year in particular, it seemed that I have some beautiful trees in my yard. And in the fall, they have some pretty nice colors that range from gold and orange and red, very, very nice hues. But this year, it was just phenomenal. And I had this idea that, well, we got some rain, and I didn't even consider the fact that I was seeing. And so then I actually, as I was taking in what you were saying, I'm wondering now, is it possible that Mama Earth has always had these colors and we weren't able to see them? Or is it that she too, as she is ascending, is taking on more hues, and we are now seeing those in a new light as well? I'm wondering if that's
it's definitely the second one. With some people, it's a little bit of the first one, because most people simply do not notice. They just don't notice anything. They don't notice anything. They don't notice. I don't know how to describe it any other way. So there have been a lot of beautiful things out there. It could be in architecture. It doesn't have to be in just natural Gaia, But I mean, have you ever looked at a building? You're walking down the sidewalk in a city. Have you ever just turned and looked at a building and realized all of the colors? It's not a gray building, or it's not a tan building. If you actually look, you'll see all the different, whether there's flecks in the mic or all those different things, and they take on this, when you actually see them, which is more than just looking with your eyes. It's maybe tuning into them would be a good way too.
Yes.
Because they're energy too, so you can actually interact with that energy.
Well, yes, and it's interesting that you should bring that up as you're saying that, and I'm taking that in. I'm reminded of the fact that now right next to my house is a house that has been abandoned and foreclosed upon. And I've lived here for 5 years. And so that house has sat empty for 5 years. Well, 5.5 now. And it is energy. And without, I feel that without the interaction of any other energy with this home, it's deteriorating. And so for me, that kind of speaks to, well, and one who may not be considering these things would say, well, of course it is. Nobody's taking care of it. Nobody's maintaining it. But I think it's more than that.
It is.
You know, because there's no interaction with it either. I can have something in my home that I haven't touched for years, but it's not going to deteriorate because
Right.
I'm in the home with it. And even though I might not interact with it, I see it. I know it's there. You know, that sort of thing. I think, you know, I could be totally wrong, but that's my thoughts and my feelings about it. And because everything is energy, and so when there's no interaction with any energy,
Everything likes love.
Well,
Everything
exactly. There's no love right now
Right.
being, you know, lavished upon that home at all. And the same happens with cars, you know, all of that sort of thing.
I'll tell you comes to mind a great story. I think you probably, if you listen to any of the other, quantum conversations that we had, with the round tables, you know, Barbara was on a couple of them. So I was living at Barbara's house for a while, and her wash machine just started, you know, to give up the ghost. It probably had, if someone was really handy, they could have, oh, no problem, fixed it. Well, we didn't have that, and we didn't have, you know, the desire, the lots of money to run out and buy a new one. So I just started talking to the washing machine. And just as if I would to one of my dogs or cat or whatever, do healing energy on the wash machine. And I said, look, you know, we really appreciate that you do all the spinning and you get the soap out and all that kind of stuff. And I know you've been doing this for a long time, but it'd be really helpful if you could keep doing this. And so what can I do to help? So I had this conversation and work it out. And I mean, it was, you know, make these incredibly horrible, or maybe it was the dryer. Anyways, one of the two. And it's terrible noises, and you kind of would put your ear mufflers on and hope that this wasn't the load of laundry where it was going to die and your laundry was soaking wet. And so I don't think I mentioned it for a while to Barbara. Then I finally included it, and I said, okay, well, this is what I've been doing with the washing, I guess it was the dryer. So have you noticed it? She said, yeah, it's really quiet. Well, for a year and a half or a year, a little bit more, it stopped. It worked perfectly. It was efficient. It dried, fluffed, everything. Not a peep. And then I was, you know, moving on to something else, another place, and I said, okay, so you got to take care of it. Just keep it up. And it did. But I mean, this was the kind of thing where it was a belt or something, and was, you know, like 2 seconds away from beyond last legs and snapping and crashing and clunk, clunk, clunk and all that kind of stuff. And there's no other reason for it. It didn't fix itself.
Right.
You know?
Well, you know, Lisa has had that exact same experience with her vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I really feel that experience and being part of that experience with her is part of what made me say that. And so, yeah, I feel like that is absolutely so. But I can't, it's amazing to me that it didn't even dawn on me that was the reason that I was seeing these gorgeous colors in my yard this year. As I said, I've lived here for 5 years. Mm-hmm. And the colors this year were just top notch. And I really, honestly, I thought it was because we'd gotten some rain.
They're not only, it's a combination of their Gaia is letting her colors shine right now, and more and more and more. So she's broken out the bigger boxes of crayons.
Yeah.
And the vibrational frequency bandwidth is such that you can see them now, and more and more and more. But until you get used to it, you have to notice. Otherwise, we're just on autopilot and, oh yeah, look, nice tree. They're really nice this year. Guess we got some rain, right? And then, but you go out and you need more hands and fingers and toes to count the different shades of a lot of things on just one, on a, not green in general, but a light green.
Right.
You need more fingers and toes. And then, medium green or dark green or whatever it is. And playing with, even if you're not, artistic, playing with some kind of colors. Go buy lots of different color yarns, or go to the thrift shop, and a lot of times I've been to look at that and cut them up, or colored pencils or any of those kind, and just play with it. You don't have to, quote unquote, just like meditating correctly. You don't have to be an artist correctly, kind of thing, but just play with it. And what it will help you do is to notice something. So look at on trees, and so look at that and try to just do a representation. Even if you say, well, I can't draw, it doesn't matter. A representation of something that's the bark. So, can you get some lines, and so kind of rounded, that's the bark, that's the tree, right, the trunk. And then something that mimics a leaf. Okay, you don't worry about, is it, all the shapes of the leaf. But now really notice what the color is. And then look at your thing, and you'll realize that if you have only 10 things and there's only one color brown, unless you, even with mixing some of the other colors in, you can't do it. You can't even come close. And so it doesn't matter so much about the drawing or the artwork or whatever you're doing, but what it's letting you do is notice. And once you crack that one, now I will absolutely guarantee you the next time you go outside, because you've had this rethinking of the leaves, you're going to text me, go, Busy, the tree's bark is all different colors, because you're noticing it now. And you can't go back.
No, I can't. And I have to share with you a couple of things that you just said that it just, okay, so you said specifically more. Okay, so you couldn't possibly have known this, but I have had the most wild experience over the last couple of days, and it's in another video, so I won't bore everybody with going over it again, but it has to do with that specific terminology and how I came about that terminology. It's a very long and convoluted thing about how that worked, but you just sent another message to me, actually from me to me, and that and there was something else. Oh, and the coloring. Yeah. I absolutely adore coloring, and I have a lot of color pencils and color pens and color crayons, and that is also a form of meditation for me. So yes. There was like several messages all in. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so if you can, I'm looking at the joy sign behind you, right? Mm-hmm. So you could even do it on a simple, just write on a piece of paper on your computer, joy, or some word that jazzes you up, right? Pick a font that's big block letters, but they're empty. I forgot the right word, but so like the joy is brown, but so that they're empty spaces, just the outline, and the center is the white paper. And then print them off and use that as your only lines, so that you're not then coloring in the lines. And what is, this is just coming to me because I'm looking at the joy, right? So right. It's the whole buzzy thing's going on.
Yeah, I know, it really is.
So you've got all that space to play within the J and the O and the Y. But then when you look at it, now you have all the negative space around it, right? That's just the term, artistic term.
Right.
But what does joy feel like to you? And that's the real playing with the colors around all those letters. And I think you'll find some really cool, and again, it has nothing about art, or if you want to, great, but but don't let your brain bring that up. I can't draw, I can't this. You can, because you're a creator being.
No,
So,
you're absolutely right. And again, again, you picked up on something, because I used to do that as a kid. I would draw the block letters on a piece of paper, and I would color them in different shapes and colors and all. And then I would also do on the outside of that different designs. And so I just
well, that was a picture I got, so I'm just following your lead.
Yeah, so well, this has been going on for me, like I said, since Wednesday, and I'm loving every moment of it, I have to tell you.
So I'm going to stop you there for a minute, because this, what we're talking about right here, and you can use it for those who are listening as a metaphor for something else that fits in your experience, right?
Right.
But this is what the new earth is about. This is what the new human, there's lots of phraseology about this is what the, ascended human, whatever, this is what it's all about, because it won't seem new to you. Because once you go from this size box of crayons to this one is the way you notice and see, or trusting and noticing, whatever jumps that you make, now you're there. So it will just be.
Right.
You won't, when you go, you won't say, well, I have all these new colors anymore, because as soon as you have all those colors, it's just what you've got.
Right.
It's no big deal. They're beautiful and you play with them and you like them, but it's not like you don't, because now you're here, it's your new normal.
Right.
And all that other stuff just disappears from your awareness. It's completely irrelevant, makes no difference whatsoever. And it just is. I don't know how to explain it any more succinctly and in great detail and specificity, but it just is. It just, so you won't see, you won't, it's not like I used to do something, right?
Well, so I'm glad you brought that up in that manner, because so there's a lot of I'm feeling very expansive myself, right? And I'm like, I feel very joyful and I'm excited and I'm happy, but there's also the other side of that out in the world as well right now. And so I get a sense that it is just a matter of allowing that to, letting that go, so to speak. There is still some things that are going to be coming up, and those that haven't recognized their own programming and conditioning and that sort of thing are having some issues within themselves. And I'm just wondering, my sense of it is that eventually they'll be able to let it go. But as they are there, it feels to me like there are some that are desperately clinging to what they think is their reality.
They're addicted to it. Well, they're addicted to the fear and the churning.
Right.
Because this may seem weird when I say this, because it's comfortable.
No, I get that. I was trapped in a spousal abuse syndrome situation before I met my recent ex-husband. He and I had a 27-year beautiful relationship up until, we parted ways. But prior to him, I understand that. I was, I don't know how to even explain it.
It's hell, but it's the hell you know, so.
Right, exactly. It's, and some of what we describe that we're feeling and seeing and sensing, to some sounds like delusions. So
Yeah, but go back to the example I gave with the story I gave with the woman with the tree with the rainbow.
Yeah.
So I didn't give her what I was seeing. I said, my eyes are changing.
That's a really good
point. I'm getting, my eyes are going and I can't, who knows? I let her go whatever. And I didn't really know the person,
Right.
but I just pointed something out to notice. It was right there. It was a nice kick-ass rainbow, so good thing to people talk about the weather, right? So there you go.
Right.
And and the only thing I did as an energetic thing was let any keys and codes that she wanted to take, they were all there for her to take them, the buzzy feeling, the quantum-y thing, all that kind of stuff. I was happy to do that. But I held the space for her to notice.
So that's a good, I love the way.
I didn't try to sell her anything, did you know that they're
I've been guilty of that. I've been guilty of that in the past before, I got it a little more expansive. Especially when it came to the geopolitical state of things, the corruption and that sort of thing. But, I noticed that the way that I speak with someone now is a little different. And it's not
so in that example, right? I could have, there could have been, I don't think there was, but there could have been a chemtrail. I could have gone on the chemtrail and a yada yada thing, right? Okay.
Right.
But by holding the space for her to notice, not telling her what I saw, or does she see X, Y, and Z, but do you see the rainbow, right? And then, so we're noticing, holding the space. And then just kind of a soft, open-ended question to get her, could she share with me what she's seeing, right?
Right.
Right there, that is, she can't go backwards from that.
Right.
Because, and I didn't do anything to her, right? So I'm not putting a whammy on her, any of the people get nervous about that, right? I just simply held the space. And I'm a transmitter.
Right.
We all are. And transmitted those codes for her and her higher self, her big, whatever her name was say, yeah, but let her do it, right? But in that moment of noticing those colors, so she stopped, had an interaction, that was all joyful, looked at something that was beautiful in her thing that she may not have noticed. Has someone held the space for her to notice? She looked at, she could actually let herself see, notice herself see. And because this was one of a very helpful tool, trick, conversation component is by her giving voice to what she saw and noticed, and then give voice to a little bit more. So in other words, a rainbow, and then the bands are what, just so I kind of relate the story. In her pausing, being in the space, being next to the transmissions, whatever she wants to receive, noticing, then giving voice to it, she's now, what she actually does from an energetic perspective is locked all that in. She took what worked for her in that moment, what was the right alignment for her, and it may have been just her higher self, doing it.
Right.
But I would suspect from what I got out of the interaction, and I'm actually getting a confirmation right now in my body that was the case, that she'd been doing this before. She just hadn't been, for whatever reason, willing to, fess up to it, we'll say.
I gotcha.
Right. She'd locked in those things. So now when she looks at a newspaper or a this or a that, whether it's colors or, the color of life or, color of conversations, right? Any of those kinds of things, it's the same noticing. It's the same awareness. It's that same quality to that, whatever that is, whatever that interaction is, whatever that. So if she happens to be a mainstream media watcher, right, and something comes on, that particular news segment will have a whole different quality to it. And because she's now actually vibrating, she up jumped. She's vibrating at different levels. So something that is, so her discernment meter will go way off the charts, and she may not cognitively be able to express it, but she can look at something and recognize what is not a match, what is out of sync, what is her resonance. Discernment meter is going, whoa, something's weird, weird about that, right? For something that's out of alignment. For something that is in alignment that she may never have noticed before,
right,
she'll see the same attributes that she labeled over here as the rainbow and those kinds of things in whatever that is. So in relation, in other words, in everything, because this is what it's all about, everything, all, right? That one jump that she made herself is now carried over everywhere. She can't go back. She can't go back in any place, on any spectrum, in any focus, on anything.
And do you feel, because for me, I feel like whatever expansion I've been doing isn't quite finished.
You mean you're thinking you might be finished and you're not quite there yet?
Well, no, I'm saying that either I'm not noticing it enough yet, or because there are intertech that we've talked about more, a couple of times, is not online, or I'm not noticing it.
Well, you'll never be finished with it.
Well, that's what I guess what I meant is like that there's I don't think that I guess that's exactly what I meant. The expansion is just going to continue. It's not.
Yeah. You don't, if you're here and you're expanding, you think, well, I'm going to expand and I'm going to have, I'm going to have this, we'll use hand signals now. So we're here and I'm going to have this come happen in that new thing that we've created, right? And so I've gone from here to here, and this happens, and I'm done. Yeah.
No.
Your source.
That's right.
You're a creator being. You're not done, because if you're done, you can't be a creator being. Well, what happens then? Right?
Yeah. Okay. I get that.
You just.
Right. Well, I guess
you never get it done and you can't get it wrong. So that's a good line.
Right. I guess when I was thinking about bringing more of me into me, because that's been my mantra, more of me into me. Mm-hmm. I guess you're right. As source, not everything's going to ever fit in here. Right?
Well, yes, it will, because it's all energy. Because there's a lot of stuff in here that remember we talked about how the programming and mentalities and all that kind of stuff is in your cellular memory.
Right.
Okay. If you just, let's say we have, I'm going to make a laughable example now, but say you had 100 programs in there. Okay. And that's a really laughable statement, because, yeah. And not just when I say you, I just mean the royal you, all of us. You.
Right.
In just taking those 100 programs and releasing them, letting them go, integrating them, doing that, right? The vast amount of space isn't quite the right word, but capacity for expansion that you have now freed up is enormous. Whether you want to think of it as the difference between a megabyte and a terabyte on computers or any of those kinds of things, right? However you're, or those odd picture, because I don't even own one of these, but those cubes that you can pack blankets in, and you take the vacuum cleaner and puts the air and it squishes them down, right? It's the same kind. So just in taking out just that small, really tiny amount of programming stuff, the energetic carrying capacity, expansion capacity that you've created is enormous. So you're always expanding, you're always up leveling, you're always getting new things. Each soul, each embodiment, which is the same thing, each fractal of source, which is the same thing, is part of the whole, so one, but it's also a slightly different, well, again, it depends on your perspective of, but down on this level, it's complicated if I tell you what the real, how simple and complex the real level is. But anyways, it's so hard to put this into words that kind of make sense. So you'll have different things that you gravitate to, or that jazz you up. So you might be some kind of intertech around maybe something that has to do with the air element, or the earth growing element, or if you could hold it maybe that way. You have them on a whole range and a whole host of everything, because you are everything. So you have access to it, but for whatever reason, you really have a preference for, this, and maybe this one over here and this one over here.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, actually.
So that you can expand and play in those. And then you're out. Remember we talked about, we started with the conversation where it's like a dancing meditation.
Right.
So you go and you're experiencing something, and, it could be in a conversation like this. It could be whatever, in person. It could be a telepathic thing, whatever it is. And in that dancing and that co-creating that and expansion that you're doing, you notice something. It could be a direct noticing. So in other words, you notice, like I would notice looking at the joy sign, and that pings something in me, and I think, oh, well, I could kind of feel a very vague, distant memory of some inner tech I have that relates to that. And I could call that up and start to play with that and remember how to do that and learn how to do that, right? Or it may light a spark in me. So I give an example. Oftentimes I look at something and go, oh, that's it. It's so great. And I'll go on and, all this creative juices flowing, all these things. And someone could be standing next to me and go, what is it? And I'll point at them, and then I'll explain just a little bit, because I'm, want to go create something on what it was. And they look at that, and they look at what I just said, and they think they don't see the correlation. But for me, it was this to that was, right?
Okay. Oh, yes, that has happened to me.
Yes.
Because then the comment is, how did you get from there to how does that work? I've had that happen to me.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. That makes perfect sense.
Look at me and go, what?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. That makes
so that's the ignition point. This thing over here was the ignition point of that fierce spark. This is another one of those good examples where that fierce energy comes in. That's just, that spark comes and ignites it, And for you, it makes perfect sense. This to that, yeah. Of course, can't you see it? Right? but that's you, because that's where that whole ignition spark came through.
And it's going to be different for all of us.
Absolutely.
Because
and it will be different for you in one moment and another. It can be, you can have a lot of similarities or samenesses, but you can also, yes, because you're creator beings and you have all of that. So that idea that was the ignition point for your thing, you have that, and you have mine, and you have Sally's and Tom's and Joseph's and all that kinds of, because you're everything.
Right. Well, a lot of folks have trouble with that whole everything thing, They can't possibly imagine, but I and it's still kind of big for me, but I have to say that, and I used it for our very first conversation, my sigil that I made originally. It's very clear to me now that I was, unbeknownst to me until you and I had that conversation, that's exactly what I put in that sigil is that source embodied. And I didn't even realize it. I mean, I can see it. Maybe others can't. But the day that I was explaining to some friends of mine what my idea of what we are,
right.
My eye happened to catch the sigil, and I was like, oh my God, I drew what I was thinking of.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's really cool. And the fact that, because it would make sense that as individuated embodiments of source, of course, we don't all want to be interested in the same thing. I mean, duh.
Well, look at it this way. The whole reason that there are all these individuated fractals of source is because source wanted to know source.
Right.
So source went forth to know source.
Right.
Well, if everybody's looking over here, then source isn't learning about anything and knowing and the rest of him, her, it over here.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Because it's all.
Right.
So from one perspective, and remember that your perception colors your perspectives. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at from one perspective, what we're talking about is different fractals. You mentioned someone was having trouble. I think you said somebody else was having trouble with the all, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks have trouble with, okay.
So I'm going to play with that for just a minute.
Okay,
I'm in a lot of trouble right now.
Yeah, please do.
So, we're all one, yes. And we're all different aspects, fractals of source, which is all. Okay. So if we're a part of a fractal of, until you know what a fractal is or a holograph is, it has all in it, just right. That's
exactly.
Just science. That's not, spiritual, airy-fairy, that's science, right? Provable, demonstrable, there you go, it's right there, so you have to deal with that.
Right,
because
exactly.
It carries through with everything else. So from one perspective, yes, we're source and we're fractals and we're all one, and we're having these individuated things where we're the part of source that's going forth and looking at Beezy's perspective and experiences, because that's in this embodiment who I am, and Sheila and all these other things, right?
Right.
So there's billions of souls, you might think of it that way, on this blue planet, and then in the Pleiadian system, and right, so on and so forth. Okay, yeah. So from one perspective, absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's not a linear perspective, but from one perspective, absolutely right.
Yeah.
The same exact thing is that there's only one soul on this planet. Of the Pleiadians, all of them, and I don't mean one here and one in the Pleiadians. I mean one that's come through.
Well, Yeah, see, and I always have had trouble. I always have had trouble differentiating between soul, spirit, source, all of those things whenever I try to think about it, and again, I know that's using the head instead of the heart. So when I think about it, to me, it's all the same thing. And when I think of soul, that's the individuation, mm, the the merging and the birthing type kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's the embodiment. This,
Yes.
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And from that perspective, it's absolutely right. What I'm saying is from the more expansive perspective, the more accurate, simply because it has the whole picture in it.
Right.
There is only one soul.
Right.
So one of those things that you quantified, talked about, is individuated. There's only one of them.
Right. I gotcha. No, exactly.
So yours and mine, and it's only one.
It's all the same.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's all right.
It is all.
But that makes everybody's brain hurt, so we won't. But that's how some. But the reason I brought that up is when someone says we're all one. That if you can stand for just a nanosecond to step back that far without your head exploding,
right,
that's what that comes from, and that's so. It is so.
Right.
And so the other thing, while we're on this about people having trouble, is some people get nervous. I've heard a number of people. Well, some get outright nervous, and some think, and they have to kind of noodle it around, see whether it follows them or not. But if our soul is coming into us, so we can get beyond that, we're not just this suit here, and we live and we die, and that's that. Okay, we're jumping. We've got a bigger perspective than that, right? Okay. So if that's the case, I think where the trepidation might be the right where it comes up is that, well, a whole lot of stuff is going to change. Yeah. And then if they kind of actively play with it, or maybe the ego mind kind of rushes in and teases that apart to look at it, well, that's not such a good thing. Because from that perspective that they're holding right that moment, the wants, the habits, the mentalities, the routines, okay, we'll call an elephant, the programs, can't stay. So if you've got, they have to go. They have to go. And whatever attachment we might have to those and not wanting them to go, because we think, well, if they're gone, well, what do I have? And there's that unknown and fear. But if you thought for a moment of what was just pick one. A lot of times I think it's helpful for people to frame it this way. So pick one of those things that, is in the list that has to go, right? That you think it's pretty expansive, and it's not small thinking, and it's more heart-centered and whatever it is, right? Feel into what is so cool and jazzing you up and spectacular and fun and yummy about that.
Right.
And then realize that whatever that feeling that you gave to, however you painted the story around that, right? It's so pale, it's transparent in the sense of there's no opacity to it at all. So, right,
right.
Compared to what is coming and you have, it's just so pale compared to the other. It's only our uncertainty about it that makes that look like the really cool shiny thing in the box, or the really wonderful teddy bear, whoever you know, whatever analogy you want to use.
Right.
It's because what you have coming is like that on steroids in a quantum magnified whatever, you know, right?
Yes.
Kind of a thing.
Yes, exactly.
A little bit of difference to it, because what's coming into you, what you then can experience, what you then can expand into and keep expanding, all that kind of stuff, is not at all coming from fear. It's not at all coming from lack. It's not at all coming from smallness. It's
Right.
not at all coming from any of those, you could frame it lower chakras, any of those lower vibrations, any of those constraints. So if that thing, go back to the description where, you know, that was really, if it's rooted in and fabricated from, so it's interesting that came out. So I think that's maybe accurate. If it's fabricated rather than created.
Ah.
Right? Okay.
Right.
So thanks for that word. That was good that they handed me that. So fabricated from that space.
Right.
It won't work. That doesn't hold, you can't, you know, it even has nothing to do with you don't want to give up. It just, that ship sailed.
Yes. Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, perfect sense. Perfect sense. Oh man, I tell you, this has been, I have had the most awesome day overall, I gotta say. And having this conversation with you this evening has been the perfect end to a perfect day, to be honest with you, for me. It's, and it's just getting more and more fun to do these conversations with you, with Lisa, with others. I'm so looking forward to many, many more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm thinking, you know, I was going to ask off camera, but what the heck? Hey, Lisa, we need to have a threesome.
Oh, she would love that, by the way. She would love that. The sooner the better. All right. So whenever you're ready for that, you just let us know.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sure she would absolutely adore that.
We'll rock the whole.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's do that. Let's make plans for that. And we'll do that off camera. We'll see. I want you to think about that. So I'm going to take this opportunity to ask everyone to share, like, and subscribe if you feel so led, and check out BZ's blog at IUV. There'll be a link in the show more section of the video. And until we all get together again, which I hope will be really, really soon, be well and be happy.
Yeah, and just want to add one thing before you
Yes,
cut it off.
please.
When you're in the sharing and liking in the comments, whether I'm going to put this on the IUV or on the video, on the YouTube and stuff, where are your experiences? Tell us about your box of crayons and your trees and whatever, you know, the buildings, whatever it is that we've talked about. What was the thing that?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's also going to be a link in there to join the Conscious Conversation Central Facebook page, where all of those conversations, I would love for them to be housed right there so that we can continue this expansive feeling. And in the comment section of YouTube too, if you feel so led, that's perfectly fine too. If you don't wish to be part of a Facebook group, I still read those comments as well. Yeah. So thank you again, BZ. I really appreciate it. It's always fun and always expansive. I always feel so buzzy when I'm talking to you. Yeah. I really do. And but I have felt pretty buzzy since Wednesday. I have to say, Wednesday seems to have really been a kickoff day for me.
Cool. Well.